All right, welcome to the Two Sons podcast. Extra bright and early this morning. Well, it was supposed to be a 7 o'clock start, but we had a little bit of a hiccup. I had to run all the way back to my house and back, so now it's 7:40, and we're a little
late,
little time crunch based on our original plan. But today's gonna be fun. We're gonna be doing Thrawn Treason. Luke finally finished it.
Oh, finally after 1 week.
Yes, Luke made me wait an additional week to get going on Thrawn Ascendancy, which I'm also excited to talk about eventually. But I thought this was a really important book on a bunch of different levels.
It was.
It left things in a way at the end that I think is interesting as it pertains to the eventual Ahsoka series that's coming. But I want you to start us off, so because it's been a little while. It's been like 8 days since I finished reading it. So why don't you start by giving me your impressions of as you were finishing the book yesterday?
First of all, I think it was the best book out of the three.
Yes.
I think the first book was the second best, and then the second book was the third best. I loved it. I thought it was true form with Thrawn. And also they made it tie into Rebels a lot.
In a bunch of ways.
Yeah. So as this book is ending, it's pretty much leading into the final battle of season 4, the season finale. And actually a lot of stuff makes sense because Palpatine specifically mentions that he wants the Chimera to be used to make like a not like a throne. He talked, like, I forget what the specific word was that he used, but if you guys remember in Rebels, where Ezra's up on the Chimera and Palpatine's trying to pull him to the dark side by like showing him his family inside of that like structure that was built onto the Chimera.
That's
so
right.
In this book specifically, they mentioned that Palpatine wants to use the Chimera to do that for Ezra.
For a special room for Ezra Bridger. Yeah, I remember that. That's interesting because I'm rewatching Rebels right now, so I'm getting exposed to all of these little connections. Like for instance, yesterday I watched the first episode with the Purgle, and they are literally swimming. The Phoenix Squadron is trying to get into basically a space lake of Clauson 36, which is the same type of fuel.
I didn't even pick that up.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like, and I appreciated that Timothy Zahn took the time to connect all that stuff because, like, basically the group of rebels saves this Purgil swarm or whatever from a mining company that is mining the Clauson 36 and shooting at the whales. Yeah. And so essentially it establishes the connection that leads to them basically getting their lives saved at the end of the movie.
On a side note, I think the Purgils, it's almost like whatever technology they use for ion cannons, I feel like the Purgils can use, because when the Purgils brush up against the Star Destroyers in the finale of Rebels, it's almost like they incapacitate the Star Destroyer like almost immediately when they touch them. It's really cool. So I wonder, I don't know if they'll get into it in Star Wars, but it's almost like the Star Destroyer is being hit by like a really intense ion cannon.
Electrical field, which makes sense because when they jump to hyperspace, they like light up a certain way. Anyway, I was watching that part and I was just like, the level of detail they went, because in this book, the general premise of the book is there's debate in the Imperial budget, as to whether or not to divert funds towards Stardust, right, which is Director Krennic's project, or towards Admiral Thrawn's, or can Admiral Thrawn keep the money for his TIE Defender project? Right. And essentially what happens is Director Krennic is not meeting his timelines as a result of these things called Grolics, which are basically like giant Minocs that are feasting on their shipping lanes. Right. And he basically challenges in a meeting with Palpatine. It's like this intense meeting with it's like Krennic, Thrawn, Savit, and Tarkin, all in this meeting. And like at one point, Palpatine's like, "I tire of you and your political squabbles," like, that kind of thing. But basically, it turns out like if Thrawn can solve the Grolics problem in less than a week, then he gets to keep his funding. But if he doesn't, then Stardust gets all of his funding. And these Grolics are basically feasting on deliberate releases of Clauson 36 which are intended to draw in the Grolix. And it turns out that
It's a huge scheme.
Admiral Savi is like stealing from these shipping lanes because he doesn't believe in the Stardust Project and where all this stuff is going. It's all very interesting, but it's like the book stays. I think this is why you and I enjoyed the first book and the third book the most. This book stays very focused on the Imperial Navy and the dynamics at play, whereas the second book turned into just a Thrawn, Anakin Skywalker / Thrawn Vader,
just gallivanting
through the unknown regions. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this was like true Thrawn, where there was a problem, and then he ended up identifying issues that no one even knew existed, which is so classic Thrawn. Like the book opens up, and then they're looking at the Grolix, flying through and attaching to ships, and then what they make it look like is these Grolix attached to ships, and they're harvesting whatever they want, like energy, right? And then they thought that caused the ships to go into hyperspace earlier than what they wanted, which is obviously incredibly dangerous. So, and then Thrawn spends probably, I don't know, a couple hours there, and he realizes that that's not even what's happening.
Yeah. He figures it out immediately.
Right. And then so probably millions of dollars have been wasted on things getting stolen or lost.
Space dollars?
Space dollars. Dollars. Credits. Space units. Credits being lost, and they think that they're just being, jettisoned into hyperspace when it's really not the case at all. And then of course the Grisks.
Yeah, so there were three major angles from this book that I wanted to hit. There's the Thrawn benevolence piece, which I want to get into a little bit more, because he, once again, like, this book starts very similar to the first book, where in the first book there's some debate as to whether or not Eli Vanto is being held back by Thrawn. Turns out he's not, because he gets a lieutenant commander gig like towards the end. And then in this one, same type of deal. Commodore Farrow gets promoted and is supposed to be given her own command, but before she gets a chance to do that command, Thrawn stalls it. And the whole book, you're like, you're wondering if he's screwing her over. But then at the end, he like literally gets her the 11th fleet.
I know, he gets her an entire fleet.
Yeah, she gets an entire fleet. So the point is like, I want to get into his benevolence a little bit, but I'll save that to the end. The other two things that I wanted to get into was the dynamic between Thrawn and Palpatine and loyalty, and then the Grisk.
That's an odd dynamic.
So let's start with the Grisk. So I hinted after the second book that the Grisk reminded me a little bit of the Yuuzhan Vong, in the sense that they're this villain that's an alien race that has a conquering mindset that is not force using. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that's where the comparisons pretty much end, because the Yuuzhan Vong had living ships. The Yuuzhan Vong were voids in the force. Like if that was the case, Vader would have picked up on that in the second book. So there's some differences there. The Grisk, though, they don't believe in like massive capital ships and flotillas. They believe by like death by a million cuts. Yeah. They believe in subverting alien races by basically attacking something they care about and using them and weaponizing that to like basically enslave entire races.
And then they almost have like tiny little armies of other aliens.
Yes. So in this book, the Grisk make a legitimate whatever you want to call it, like invasion into Imperial territory. Right. So does that change your mind at all as to whether or not the Grisk will be a future villain in Star Wars or no?
Yeah, I think they will be. I really do. I think they're really cool. First of all, the idea of the Grisk is super neat, and the fact that it's another alien race that's dominating and powerful and cunning. I think it really sets the stage nicely for like this unknown villain that most people don't know about, and I think it sets the stage quite nicely for casual viewers to meet them.
Oh yeah, and like they're just different. We talked about this. Like Star Wars has been intent, and I disagree with this as a strategy, but Star Wars has been intent on trying to like build a new direction for Star Wars that goes beyond the conflict of the Jedi versus the Sith. Right. Where I don't agree with that, because that being overplayed was not the issue. The stuff that was overplayed was like the Empire stuff, the Palpatine stuff, the planet killing weapon stuff. Like that was the stuff that was overplayed. Right. But that said, they've gone in two distinct directions with these books. They've gone with the Grisk, and then they've gone with the Nihil in the High Republic. Right. In the Nihil, it's like they're uninteresting because they're just a band of raiders They
Oh, really? I like them.
I
think
find
they're
them
cool.
interesting. I
Yeah.
find them interesting from the standpoint of Markion Rowe.
And the paths.
But yeah, when you're reading those books and it's like, oh, Nihil Fleet is there, you're like, okay, well, it's just a bunch of drugged up raiders. But it's like the Grisk though, it's like
More cunning.
There's all this stuff. There's cunning involved. They blow up their ships. Like there's a moment at the end of this book where like Admiral Aralani borrows Thrawn's TIE Defender Squadron and uses them in conjunction with her one small ship against two larger dreadnoughts, and kills them both. But at the end, like she has to give an order for the TIE Defenders to flee because she can see that the ships are starting to self-destruct.
Yeah.
And then they blow up because the Grisks like try to leave no trace of their existence,
right? Or any of their technology. Yeah, they try and remove all technology that could be examined. The Grisk are so interesting to me because I know so little about them. Like,
exactly.
Like even when you're reading about the Grisk, you like do a quick Google search of what a Grisk looks like, right? And I still don't really even know.
Yeah,
like they've got some cool looking fan art, like rendition. Fan art is incredible,
dude.
We were just talking about fan art this morning with a Star Destroyer that Jason had found that he's going to use for his set.
Yes.
But fan art is incredible, but I still don't know what they look like really, and I can only envision what they look like.
And it'll be interesting to see because my guess is that would be an interesting. So let's say, for instance, Ahsoka is in Mandalorian season 2, correct? And in Mandalorian season 2, at this point, we know that Moff Gideon doesn't die, but is captured. In the Luke Skywalker scene, right? And so essentially the Empire is no longer a threat. This is 5-something years after the First Order is not on the scene yet. So if Ahsoka meets Thrawn, presumably at some point in that show, which we believe she will, there will have to be some sort of dynamic. One of two things is going to happen. Either Thrawn's going to be commanding some portion of the Imperial remnant, which I find unlikely.
I agree with that.
Which
it's not legitimate enough.
Based on, and this is a good transition, based on the concept of his loyalty to Palpatine, like the Aralani straight up tells him, like at the end of this book, like we need you to come back to the Ascendancy at some point, like. You're our best soldier. You're our most important commander. Like we're gonna need you to get here eventually.
Right.
And he's like, no, my mission is not complete yet. Serving the Empire. So presumably, like at some, like my theory was like that scene where he jumps into hyperspace with the Purrgil could have been his perfect excuse to leave and go back to the Ascendancy at that point.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Because he has plausible deniability to have essentially been removed from his post by these Purrgil, you know what I mean?
Well, and there's definitely a lot of conflict that's happening between him and Palpatine. And I don't know your take on this, but I don't think Thrawn is terribly loyal to Palpatine.
Of course not.
Okay, perfect. And then because I think what Thrawn is loyal to is the idea of order.
Yes.
Right. And right now the Empire is the best bet for him in order to ensure that order is happening across the galaxy. I think as soon as he feels like order's not there, then I feel like he's out. And that's why I don't think he's done what some of the other admirals or moffs have done after, the Empire's disbanded.
Because he wouldn't gain anything from
He wouldn't gain. He'd be a tiny little drug lord somewhere and he would be doing nothing, whereas he's got the entire Chiss Ascendancy somewhere, right, where he can join again. And the Chiss, they don't care if Coruscant is burning. Like,
no, they don't.
And which is fine. It sounds like they're bad for that, but that's just not their thing. They just want to make sure that they're okay in their area of space, right? So I think that theory is very reasonable. I really hope that they get into how Ezra and Thrawn either team up or cut ties. I don't think either one of them would kill each other after they're pulled into hyperspace.
Well, and the interesting dynamic there is like literally they are the one, to my knowledge, the one group who's ever bested him. So there would probably be a level of respect there. You know what I mean?
Probably so. Yeah.
But like in his conversations with Palpatine, they're kind of awkward.
They're super awkward.
Like every time he straight up says like who are you serving? Like he always says like both.
Right.
Like he just says both. Like I do what I am doing is in the best interest of both the Chiss Ascendancy and the Galactic Empire. Like he'd never actually just like he won't even lie because he has too much honor to lie. Like he won't even just look at him and be like, yeah, I'm with you, bro. Like
and then Palpatine is you could hear Palpatine's thoughts, which were really cool. And then he was thinking about how he's going to try and like turn Thrawn on the Chiss and use him as almost like an enemy to the Chiss. Potentially.
That scene was interesting.
It was super interesting.
He rapid fire because it's his thoughts. He rapid fire goes through like 4 potential scenarios of what he could do with Thrawn.
Right.
Did you catch that?
No, yeah. And that just goes to show like Palpatine thinks that he's in power still of everything when really that's probably not the case. Thrawn is an ultimate character. He's an ultimate character, and Timothy Zahn did such a good job with him. And they did such a good job. It's kind of funny because as we were talking, I was just thinking like, man, we've talked a lot about Rebels. And that's one of the things that I love about Star Wars is everything matters. Everything should matter, right? Everything that's happened in this book matters to Rebels, which then matters to the Ahsoka series down the road, which matters to Mandalorian. And again, not to beat a dead horse, I think that's what gets lost in the new movies 7, 8, and 9. So the fact that Timothy Zahn did such a good job coordinating this with Rebels and how they just met beautifully is so cool. And it was really neat to kind of, as you're like listening to the book, to realize the timeline. You're like, holy cow, this is right before the season finale of Rebels. And it's really cool for them to even talk about that. It's just incredible. Like the amount of effort that they put into the plot of Star Wars is amazing.
Rebels is on my rewatch quickly becoming one of my favorite bits of Star Wars content. Like it just, the level of detail they put into like little things like, oh, like these are TIE fighters that have been repurposed for the mining guild and they're painted yellow and they have like different solar panels on them. Or like this is, in the Imperial fleet, here are the different levels of ships that a commander might have control over.
Right.
It's not just a Star Destroyer. There are these smaller freighters. There are these like kind of mid-size like Corvette type ships that have these 3 massive engines on them. Like they go deep into the understanding of the Imperial hierarchy. You even learned about that on Lothal. Like, okay, this is Governor Price. Well, this is her, I can't remember what she's called, but the blonde-haired chick, the one who dies when she blows up in that car. Like she's the representative who represents. You just learn a lot about the nitty-gritty details of the Empire and how it was all put together.
Well, and what's really cool too is we know the TIE Defender exists, right? That's a huge plot point in this book. It's a huge plot point in Rebels. But then all of a sudden, the TIE Defender kind of ceases to exist for what we know about it. Like, right. So
and it's because they never had the funding.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so cool because that was probably an afterthought that really good writing helped cover up. Mm-hmm. Right. No, and that's absolutely. What's so cool about Star Wars. And I hate to say it versus like Marvel. Sorry. I'll say it.
But like to put a bow on the Palpatine thing, like I thought it was a really, really interesting move because it's Palpatine essentially putting it on the back burner. It's Palpatine going like, I'm not sure about this Thrawn guy, but we'll get to this later.
Right.
And then later never comes because he gets killed.
Well, and he's like, you got to go deal with the rebels, Phoenix Squadron.
Exactly. Like it's time for you to go deal with Phoenix Squadron. So like it kind of like sets the stage for this open, because like essentially when he gets picked up off of that planet in the first book, he's brought before Palpatine and he makes his oath of loyalty to Palpatine. And from that point, he's serving Palpatine. When Palpatine ceases to exist, when the Empire ceases to exist, naturally we can assume that Thrawn's loyalties shift to the Ascendancy.
Yeah.
Do you think Ahsoka wants to find Thrawn for the purpose of finding Ezra? Because Ahsoka would not be wanting revenge. I can't think of any reason because he's not active with the Empire at that point. Presumably the only reason she's searching for Thrawn is strictly to find Ezra because that was his last known contact, which I think would be really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that just go hand in hand. I don't think you can search for Ezra without searching for Thrawn at that point. And again, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with Thrawn. I don't think so. Who knows? Thrawn could never even show up again. Right, that could be the end of Thrawn, but I highly doubt that that's going to happen. He's too good of a character.
Oh, he has to show. The Ahsoka hint was too intentional, right?
Yeah, no, I think so.
And then they've written 6 Thrawn books in the last 6 years. Like, I mean, come on, like they've got to be doing something.
I agree, but it's going to be really interesting to see if because right now I envision Thrawn and Ezra sitting on some random planet next to a campfire talking about theories and how to like better the galaxy, right? Like that's what I envision is happening, which is probably so incorrect, but honestly, like what else are they going to be doing? They're outcast into who knows where space.
No, it's
right?
true.
So
it just what's annoying about it is it's the cap that's been put on that entire storyline. Like they can't have Ahsoka and Thrawn run off to save the galaxy together because the First Order happens 25 years later. Like you trap yourself under the narrative weight of what you do in the major movies, and they just did so much damage to that with the major movies that it's just disappointing.
It's so sad.
But anyway, the other potential outcome there is essentially Ahsoka finds Thrawn.
Yeah.
And Thrawn basically says, I haven't worked for the Empire since what happened on Lothal that day.
Yeah.
I am working with the Ascendancy again, and I am knee-deep in this Grisk problem. Will you help me? They are going to attack the New Republic.
Yeah.
And then essentially that could be, gosh, can you imagine how much they could get into with that?
Oh, it could be incredible. Can you imagine too if Thrawn, because Thrawn's he's kind of a good villain, right? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if Thrawn was titled just like a good guy? Just good guy Thrawn.
But that was
so cool.
That was the third thing I wanted to talk about. Like
good guy Thrawn.
He comes through for Commodore Pharaoh at the end.
Thrawn is legitimately a good man.
He literally says, like, I did not let you get that assignment because it was beneath you.
Right.
You are too good of a commander to waste on anything less than a fleet.
Right.
So I got you the 11th fleet. Like, he is a good, honorable man.
He is.
He would not be the kind of person whose purposes would cross with Ahsoka's in a negative way.
Right.
They would be on the same page there.
Right. Yeah. And his whole entire idea is I'm going to be with the Empire right now because they're in power and I want order. Because lack of order creates, small skirmishes, places, it creates death. I legitimately think that Thrawn is a good guy.
Lola's over here trying to unplug our entire setup. You gotta be careful. It's okay.
She's so funny.
She had a 50% chance of ruining the show by kicking the outlets, and she got the right one, so we're good. If she got the other one, it would have been a problem.
What'd you think about the space battles? Because there's incredible detail put into those space battles. What I thought of the space battles is so when two people are sparring with each other, let's say with random weapons, a sword, a knife, a gun, it's extremely physical, right? So I try and punch you, you block me with your staff, whatever. And that's legitimately how the space battles were portrayed, right? So for example, spoiler alert, which we've been deep into spoilers at this point. Near the end of the book, there's a battle legitimately between two Star Destroyers, which is really, really cool to conceptualize with with Admiral
technically
Savit.
Between 4 Star Destroyers, 3 on 1.
True, but it's mainly Savit and versus Thrawn, right?
Yeah.
So and it talked about how Thrawn would use his TIE fighters to essentially block ion cannons, so then his ship wouldn't get hit by them, and then he could spar and then make his own move. Actually, no, he had Pharaoh do that for him.
Yeah, this was the all-time power
You're
move
right, yeah,
in Thrawn's career.
I completely did not even set that up.
To be clear, he travels
gave that scene no justice.
In a shuttle to Admiral Savit's ship.
Yes.
Walks up to the bridge before Savit can go down to meet him in the hangar bay.
Right.
Meets him in the bridge and goes, and Savit's got 3 Star Destroyers at his command, and goes, I'm here, basically says, I'm here to watch Commodore Pharaoh beat you because I've given her the plan to beat you.
Yeah.
And Savit's like, I have 3 Star Destroyers.
Yeah.
That's Commodore Pharaoh. And he's like, oh, by the way, I'm going to do it without costing a single human life.
Right.
And literally he beats Admiral Savit's fleet by himself while sitting on his bridge.
Just watching it.
Just the all-time power move.
It's incredible.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. And then they get into use of items during these battles, which we've never seen before.
Oh,
right?
like lobbing. Oh, you're talking about like the tractor beam lobbing thing where they just shut the machine off and just throw some shit.
Yeah, so they talk about these Grisk generators, which we might see being used in some of the more mainstream stuff, maybe Ahsoka. But essentially, the Grisk have these generators that they cast out into space, and they're cloaked. So what happens is essentially they're tiny gravity wells, so they can pull ships out of hyperspace lanes. So then the Gris can essentially prey on them, or so they can mess up the Empire or whoever's ability to travel through space. So anyways, these generators exist, and the Empire gets their hands on them, or Thrawn gets their hands on them. And then what they end up doing is they use the generator in order to battle against the Grisk. And the Grisk were the creators of this generator. So in one part, they have the generator kind of like, it seems like underneath their ship, and then they turn on their tractor beam, and then they launch the generator past them, and then it's floating slowly.
Yeah, it's like it'll be there in 15 minutes.
Yeah, and then it slowly floats underneath one of the Grisk ships, and then they use that to pull TIE Defenders out of hyperspace, so then the TIE Defenders can fight against the Grisk ships and be in a perfect spot where they can get pulled out of hyperspace, but then be at a area in which they can attack the Grisk ship.
Yeah, they were literally using
incredible.
the little gravity well thing as like almost like a nav buoy to bring the TIE Defenders like in and out of hyper. It was so cool. And
it was
by
incredible.
the way, side note, this is brought up in the beginning chapters of the Ascendancy Chaos Rising book. Like, it's a known fact about hyperspace travel that you cannot jump to hyperspace within the gravity well of anything. Not just an interdictor cruiser, not just a Grisk, a gravity well, but also in a planet. Which is within the gravity well
again,
and all I could think of is that stupid scene in fucking Rise of Skywalker where he's hyperspace skipping, and he's at one point like around a bunch of skyscrapers on a planet.
It drives me
are you
crazy.
Me,
it drives me crazy. If people want to start an uprising with Jason and I right here, right now, and try and get those movies taken off the face of the earth, we are down.
Dude.
Hit us up. They're so bad. They're so bad. It was careless. It was careless. There's so much effort that so many people put into creating Star Wars. George Lucas, right? Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, Timothy Zahn, like all these amazing minds who are creating Star Wars, and then it just gets dumped on by 7, 8, and 9.
By the guy who did Star Trek. Like, it's just so ridiculous.
Just like no rules. Oh my gosh. It drives me crazy. It hurts. It hurts.
Was there any other notes you had on the Thrawn book that you wanted to get to? And by the way, guys, we're going to have a lot more Thrawn. We're doing the Ascendancy trilogy right away. I've already got it. Luke is probably going to start it today, so we'll definitely get into more Thrawn.
I think it's really cool because the cultivating inferiors, we already touched on that with Pharaoh, and then also Eli Vanto.
Which it turns out, because there's another thing, very similar vibe. Eli's annoyed. Why did he send me to the Ascendancy? They don't even give me the rank of anything other than lieutenant.
Yeah.
I'm tucked down looking through these numbers, like what's the deal with this? And then at the end of the book, Admiral Arlani reveals to Vanto that, hey, you're doing this. The data you're looking into is supposed to be what allows us to figure out what causes third sight to disappear in our navigators. So, like, and it is basically.
Let's explain what third sight is.
Yeah, so third sight is basically the premonitions in the Force, the ability to see the future,
right,
which the Chiss Navigator girls can use to navigate hyperspace lanes.
Essentially, the Chiss depend on these Navigator girls. Most of them are female for whatever reason. They don't know why.
They're all female between 7 and 14, right?
Yeah, and then they don't know why they have this ability or how they get it, and it tends to decrease over time. But it's similar to that of the Force. It's sort of like the Force. Well, it is the Force.
It is the
most
Force.
likely. Yeah.
It is the Force.
So and then
they straight up say that in the second book.
Yeah, they use it. They use that ability, and then they use the girls as navigators versus traditional navigator systems. Let's see here. The only other thing that I wanted to talk about is I think, and we don't need to get into the weeds on this, but the Grisk I think are an ultimate villain because they're incredibly evil. There's a part of the book where one of the navigators talks to Eli Vanto, and she pretty much asks him, she's like, hey, if we get taken over by the Grisk, will you kill me and my sisters?
That's right.
Because she's so fearful of the Grisk. And the Grisk apparently have this ability to just cut deep into the conscious and the souls of the people that they're trying to take over. And she was so fearful of that happening that she wanted to be killed rather than be captured.
And Eli agreed.
Yeah, and Eli agreed.
And Admiral Arlani kind of respected him for it at the end,
right.
if you remember, which I thought was interesting.
Right. And then the last thing is names for ships in Star Wars are incredible.
Oh, they've always been so good.
Yeah. So Millennium Falcon. We've got the Thunder Wasp, right?
The Thunder Wasp.
What were some of the other ones?
What's
Fire Drake.
Yeah, the Fire Drake
ISD
Fire Drake is that's Admiral Savit's ship, right?
Yeah, and then there's I think it's called the Mist Hunter.
Yeah, Mist Hunter was one of the ones on his flank. And then
what was it? I had a Stormbird.
Stormbird, that's right. Yeah, they're
tight.
So cool.
So that was my last thing I wanted to say. I was listening and just getting great enjoyment, when they're talking.
What's Admiral Arlani's ship again? Is that the first one?
It wasn't as cool. No, the Arlani's ship.
I can't remember.
I forget what it's called. It'll have to come to me. But yeah, even her ship's name was super cool. But they put so much effort into naming these ships and making them cool. And I really do appreciate it.
All right, guys. So we will be doing more Thrawn in the coming weeks. Lord of the Rings comes out this week too. So just plan on every week getting an update on Game of Thrones, an update on Thrawn, and an update on Lord of the Rings. And as always, we appreciate your guys' support, and we will see you next time.
Thanks a lot.